My friends, listen closely. And one of the greatest powers you can ever learn is the power of detachment. Now, I'm not talking about being cold, unfeeling, or cruel. No, that's not what we're after. I'm speaking about a kind of spiritual strength, a quiet, steady force that says, I will not let this world shake me. You see, there comes a time when you have to step back from the noise, from the opinions, from the endless need to be seen, to be heard, to be liked. That's the moment you begin to grow. When I say learn to act like you don't care, I mean learn to stop giving your peace away so easily. Some folks spend their whole lives being yanked around the reactions of others. A side comment, a raised eyebrow, a missed text, and their whole day is ruined. That is no way to live. That is not freedom. That is slavery to every passing opinion, every little wind of judgment. And the truth is, some of the people whose opinions you're chasing wouldn't even recognize your soul if it stood right in front of them. Yet still, you bend and twist self to win their approval. You exhaust yourself trying to please people who are just as lost and confused as you. But when you learn to let go, when you step out of that trap, something changes. You begin to hear yourself again. You begin to feel grounded. And that, my friends, is what detachment is all about. It's not about being above others. It's not about pretending you don't feel things. No, it's about being deeply rooted in something stronger than mood, stronger than opinion, stronger than ego. It's about finding your foundation in what cannot be shaken. There's a quiet kind of power in the man or woman who walks through a storm and doesn't flinch. Not because they don't feel the rain, but because they know the rain can't drown them. That kind of peace doesn't come from pretending. It comes from understanding. Understanding that not everything needs your reaction. Not every insult deserves an answer. Not every disappointment is the end. And not every loss is worth your tears. You see, there's a trap in overcaring. It makes you reactive. It makes you desperate. You chase love. You chase respect. You chase opportunities. And all that chasing just leaves you tired and empty. But when you detach, when you stop needing everyone to go your way, you become dangerous in the best kind of way. Because now nothing controls you. You're not performing anymore. You're not begging anymore. You're not waiting for someone else to validate your worth. Let the world misunderstand you. Let them underestimate you. Let them walk away if they must. You don't have to flinch. You don't have to explain. You don't have to beg anyone to see your value because you already know who you are. And when you know who you are, when you really know, the rest becomes noise, just noise. And you don't need to care about every sound that reaches your ears. But I'll tell you something else. Detachment also teaches you how to love better because real love isn't about control. It's not about clinging. It's not about being everything to someone else. When you learn to detach, you give people space to be human. You stop trying to fix or rescue everyone. You start loving from a place of fullness, not for emptiness. And that love, my friends, that love can move mountains. You don't need to be cold to be strong. You don't need to be numb to be unbothered. What you need is clarity. You need to know what truly matters and what doesn't. And once you have that, you can walk through the chaos without losing your step. You can smile in the face of rejection. You can keep building when they say you'll never make it. You can keep showing up, not because you're desperate to prove something, because you've already proven it to yourself. So learn this. Caring less about the noise lets you care more about the truth. And the truth is, you're already enough. You're already loved. You're already equipped to face what's in front of you. Everest to be in it. The only thing left is to stop giving so much power to the things that don't matter. Let them talk. Let them doubt. You just keep walking. You know, there's something that has stolen more joy, more peace, and more purpose from people than almost anything else in this world. And that's the need for approval. The craving to be seen, applauded, validated. It creeps in slowly. It starts with little things. A compliment here, a pat on the back there. But soon, if you're not careful, it becomes a way of life. You start waking up not to live for God, not to live for truth, not even to live for your calling, but to live for the crowd. And that, my friends, is a dangerous way to live because the crowd is fickle. One day they love you. The next day they forget your name. One day they cheer and the next they mock. If you build your identity on the opinions of others, you will always be at the mercy of their changing moods. You'll never feel settled. You'll never feel whole. You'll be tossed like a leaf in the wind, always performing, always adjusting, always doubting yourself. And let me tell you, no applause in this world can fix what's broken in your soul if you've forgotten who you are without it. Some of us have spent years chasing praise, chasing recognition. We think, if I can just get them to notice me, if I can just prove myself, if I can just hear them say, good job, maybe then I'll feel worthy. But that's a lie. That's a trap. And I say this with love. If you need someone else to tell you that you matter, you'll never stop needing it. You'll go from person to person, job to job, platform to platform, trying to fill a hole that only truth can fill. And the truth is this: you were created with value. You were born with purpose. No human approval can add to it, and no rejection can take it away. So when I say learn to act like you don't care, I'm not telling you to become hard-hearted. I'm not telling you to walk around as if people don't matter. No, I'm telling you to stop needing their validation to believe in yourself. Stop giving your self-worth to people who didn't create you. Stop letting your confidence rise and fall based on whether someone praises you or not. Because if they can give it, they can take it. But when your strength comes from within, when your identity is anchored in something higher, no one can take that from you. You have to get to a place where you can walk into a room and not need to impress anyone, where you can speak truth without worrying who will approve, where you can succeed quietly and fail boldly. Not because you don't care about people, but because you care more about staying true to yourself. You care more about living with integrity. You care more about doing what you were put on this earth to do, not just what will make people clap for you. And here's the beautiful part: when you stop chasing approval, you actually become more powerful. You stop hesitating. You stop second guessing. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's idea of success. You move with freedom. You love without fear. You lead without needing applause. And when you fall, because we all do, you get back up, not because someone told you to, but because you know who you are. There's nothing more freeing than knowing you don't have to prove anything to anybody. You don't have to match someone else's timeline. You don't have to fit someone else's mold. You don't have to earn love. It's already yours. You don't have to earn dignity. You were born with it. And once you stop chasing what was never meant to sustain you, you make room for what truly does. So let them say what they want. Let them misunderstand you. Let them ignore you, judge you, dismiss you. Just keep walking. You keep showing up. You keep honoring the truth inside you. Because in the end, it won't be the crowd that defines you. It won't be the praise that builds you. It'll be the quiet, steady strength of a soul that no longer needs permission to shine. Walk on. Let me tell you something that might just change the way you see the world, the way you move through your days. You cannot control everything. You cannot control what others say about you. You cannot control how people treat you. You cannot always control the outcomes. And if you try to, you'll wear yourself thin chasing what was never yours to manage in the first place. But what you can control, what you must control, is how you respond. You see, that's where the real power lies, not in the chaos around you, but in the calm within you. Too many people live like they're puppets, with their emotions being pulled in every direction. Someone cuts them off in traffic, they explode. Someone makes a comment online, they spiral. Someone doesn't give them the respect they were hoping for, and suddenly their whole sense of self-worth is shaken. That's not living, that's reacting. That's letting your peace be hijacked by every passing moment. But I'm here to tell you, you are not at the mercy of your circumstances. You are not at the mercy of your feelings. You are not a prisoner of your emotions unless you choose to be. Now hear me, feelings are real. I'm not saying ignore them. I'm not saying suppress them, but I am saying don't let them sit in the driver's seat. Don't hand over the keys of your life to temporary emotions. You were made for more than that. You were made to walk through fire and still come out unburned, not because the fire isn't hot, but because something deeper inside you says, I won't let this break me. There's a stillness that comes when you realize your reactions are yours to control. You don't have to yell just because someone else raised their voice. You don't have to argue just because someone pushed your buttons. You don't have to retaliate, prove, or explain every time you're challenged. That kind of restraint doesn't come from weakness, it comes from wisdom. It comes from knowing who you are and not letting every disturbance pull you off course. Think about a tree planted by the river. The winds come, the rains fall, the seasons change. But the tree does not run, it does not panic, it bends, but it does not break. Why? Because it is rooted. It draws strength not from the storm, but from something deeper, so unseen. That's what your spirit must become. Not tossed and turned by every comment, every mistake, every delay, but anchored in truth, anchored in faith, anchored in who God created you to be. And let me tell you something else. There will always be people who try to provoke you. There will always be situations that invite you to lose your temper, to lose your focus, to lose your soul. The enemy doesn't always come in loud and obvious ways. Sometimes he comes in the form of small irritations, petty arguments, insecurity dressed as pride. You have to be wise enough to say, I will not be moved by this. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. Clear on your mission. Clear on your values. Clear on what matters and what doesn't. Some of the strongest battles you will ever fight will not be on a stage or in a courtroom or on a battlefield. They will be in your own mind. The fight to stay calm when everything in you wants to react. The fight to forgive when bitterness feels easier. The fight to keep going when discouragement whispers that it's all for nothing. But friend, those battles are where greatness is forged. Those moments are where character is formed. That's where you become someone that the world cannot shake. So when I say learn to act like you don't care, what I'm really saying is learn to control your response. Learn to choose peace over proving a point. Learn to walk away when something isn't worth your energy. That's not weakness. That's maturity. That's strength wrapped in stillness. That's knowing you have the power to respond, but choosing to rise above instead. Because when you live like that, when you stop being pulled by every provocation, people will notice. Not because you shouted louder, but because you stood taller. Not because you had the last word, but because you kept your soul intact. And that, my friends, is a life worth living. Stay rooted. There's a word we don't hear often enough in this world, boundaries. And when we do hear it, we sometimes confuse it with being rude or distant or selfish. But I want to tell you today, with the love of a shepherd and the clarity of truth, that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's sacred. It is one of the most powerful acts of love you can offer, not just to others, but to yourself. Because without boundaries, we invite confusion, we invite disrespect, we invite chaos into places where peace should live. We live in a time where people expect access to you at all times. They expect your attention, your energy, your time, even your emotions, as if you owe it to them. And the moment you start pulling back, the moment you begin protecting your spirit, you may hear, you've changed. Well, yes, you have. You've grown. You've come to understand that your peace is not up for grabs, that your purpose cannot be interrupted every time someone needs a favor or validation or reaction. You don't have to explain yourself every time you say no. And you don't have to apologize for choosing peace over pressure. You don't need to justify why you can't take that call, why you're walking away from that situation, or why you're spending more time alone. Because you have every right to guard what God has placed in you. You have every right to protect your time, your mind, your heart. The world will try to pull you in 100 directions, but only you can decide what gets your yes. And a mature yes always starts with a strong no. We think that to be kind, we must always be available. But availability without discernment leads to burnout. It leads to resentment. It leads to spiritual and emotional exhaustion. And let me tell you, when your cup is empty, you cannot pour into anyone else, not with joy, not with strength, not with love. So if you truly want to serve others, if you truly want to walk in purpose, then you must learn to serve from overflow, not depletion. And to do that, you need boundaries. Some of you have been saying yes when your heart is crying no. You've been showing up for people who wouldn't cross the street for you. You've been giving chances to situations that only keep taking from you. And you've been doing it out of fear. Fear of being seen as selfish, fear of being rejected, fear of disappointing others. But let me ask you, what is it costing you? What is it costing your peace, your health, your focus? Because every yes to something draining is a no to something life-giving. Every time you overextend, you underinvest in what truly matters. And I want you to know there is strength in silence. There is wisdom in walking away. You don't have to defend your boundaries to people who never respected them to begin with. You don't have to shrink yourself to keep someone else comfortable. You are not responsible for how someone feels about the line you draw. You are only responsible for drawing it in truth and love. And when you do, don't feel guilty. Feel grounded. Feel whole. Because boundaries aren't walls. They are gates. Gates that open to what is good and close to what is not. Even Jesus, the Son of God, didn't let everyone in. He walked away from crowds. He withdrew to quiet places. He chose his inner circle carefully. He loved everyone, yes, but he did not allow everyone equal access. And if the Savior of the world set boundaries, what makes us think we shouldn't? There is holiness in knowing your limits. There is clarity in choosing your space. There is healing in stepping back. You see, when you set boundaries, you teach others how to treat you. You say, this is where I end, and you begin. This is what I will accept, and this is what I will not. And that clarity, though it may upset a few, will elevate many things in your life, your relationships, your focus, your peace. You begin to notice that the wrong people fall away and the right ones draw near. Not because you forced it, but because truth always reveals alignment. So don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to sit in silence instead of explaining yourself. Don't be afraid to disappoint others if it means being true to yourself. Because at the end of the day, you don't owe the world your exhaustion. You owe it your purpose. And your purpose needs space to breathe. Hold the line. There is a certain kind of exhaustion that settles into your soul when you've been living too long for things that don't really matter. When your attention is scattered, when your heart is tied up in the trivial, when your days are shaped more by what others expect than by what you were created to do. You start to lose yourself, and you can feel it. You can feel that subtle emptiness creeping in, that quiet frustration that whispers, there's got to be more to life than this. And there is. But to find it, you have to learn how to let go of the noise. You have to learn to focus on what actually matters to you. Not what matters to the crowd, not what matters to your critics, not what matters to your ego, what matters to your soul, what matters to your spirit, what pulls you closer to peace and purpose and away from the chaos of performance. Because the truth is, you were never meant to chase every distraction. You were never meant to fight every battle. You were never meant to carry the weight of everyone's expectations. Yet that's exactly what happens when we start living for applause, for appearances, for attention. We spread ourselves thin chasing things that have no eternal value, and we wonder why we feel empty. You can spend your whole life trying to keep up, trying to prove something, trying to win approval, and still feel lost. You can climb ladders, gain followers, collect possessions, and still look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back. Because none of that is rooted in what matters most. And you know what matters most? Peace, purpose, calling truth, the quiet things, the steady things, the deep things, the things you can't post about, but that carry you when nothing else can. We were not created to be pulled in every direction by every voice. There's a reason why silence speaks louder than noise. There's a reason why stillness is more powerful than hustle. When you stop running toward everything and start listening to your own heart, truly listening, you'll begin to hear what you've been missing. You'll hear what you were created for. And it won't sound like the crowd. It won't sound like comparison. It won't sound like fear. It'll sound like truth. Quiet, consistent truth. And when you know that truth, when you lock into what matters most, you stop giving energy to things that don't deserve it. You stop responding to every opinion. You stop chasing shallow success. You stop wasting time on things that don't feed your soul. Instead, you begin to live with clarity. You begin to wake up with direction. You begin to speak and act from a place of conviction, not confusion. And people will notice, oh, yes, they'll notice. Not because you're louder, not because you're doing more, but because you're grounded, because you're not so easily moved, because you're not chasing the wind. You become someone who is anchored, someone who knows what truly matters and isn't afraid to walk away from what doesn't. But hear me, friends, this kind of focus doesn't come by accident. It comes by intention. It comes by saying no to what's easy so you can say yes to what's eternal. It comes by shutting out the noise so you can hear your own soul again. It comes by asking the hard questions. What am I really living for? What truly matters to me? Am I chasing what's loud, or am I following what's lasting? You'll know you're on the right path when peace starts to return, when you don't feel the need to prove so much, when your days begin to reflect your values, not someone else's version of success, when you start finding joy in simplicity, in depth, and purpose. And when the things that once distracted you, pettiness, comparison, meaningless drama, start to feel so small you no longer have the energy to care. Because that's what happens when you act like you don't care, not in arrogance, but in wisdom. You care less about the noise and more about the meaning. You care less about being noticed and more about being faithful. You care less about the temporary and more about the timeless. Don't let the world steal your focus. Don't let the trivial pull you from the truth. Don't let distractions drown out your destiny. Keep your eyes on what matters. There is a kind of strength, dear friends, that the world doesn't recognize. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It doesn't always show up in muscles or in words or in grand achievements. No, this strength moves quietly. It walks softly. It doesn't need to announce itself because it already knows who it is. It's the strength of someone who refuses to be shaken. The strength of someone who knows how to stay calm when everything around them is coming undone. The strength of someone who has learned to act unbothered, not because they don't care, but because they care about the right things. This strength comes from within. It isn't something you can fake. You can try to look tough on the outside, but if there's a storm raging on the inside, it won't be long before it shows. But when your soul is anchored, when you're rooted in peace, when you've been through enough to know what truly matters, then, my friend, you don't flinch every time life throws a curve. You don't panic when people leave. You don't lose yourself every time someone doesn't understand you. You've been through the fire, and you've learned how to walk through it without letting the flames define you. People might look at you and think you're cold. They might say, why don't you react? Why don't you fight back? Don't you care what they're saying? But they don't know that your silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. They don't know that you've reached a place where your peace is more precious than your pride. They don't know that you've found strength in stillness, that you've learned not every battle is yours to fight. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every insult needs your energy. You see, when you learn to act like you don't care, you're not pretending. You're prioritizing. You're choosing to keep your dignity when someone tries to pull you into the mud. You're choosing to stay focused when everything is screaming for your attention. You're choosing to stay true to who you are instead of letting someone else dictate your worth. This world will test you. Oh, yes, it will. It will poke and prod and press on every sore spot in your heart. It will send people into your life just to stir the pot, just to test your patience, just to see if you'll break. But you won't. Not if you've learned that real strength doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. It comes from holding your tongue when you could lash out, from walking away when your pride wants to stay and argue, from letting go when everything in you wants to hold on. That's not giving up. That's not growing up. That's not weakness. That's power. That's knowing that your energy is too valuable to waste, that your calling is too important to be derailed by petty distractions, that your purpose isn't to win arguments, but to live with integrity. And that's exactly what the world needs more of. Not more noise, not more shouting, but more people who are grounded, people who can walk through storms and still speak peace. People who can be hurt and not hardened. People who can be rejected and still love. People who can be overlooked and still keep building. And you won't find that strength by accident. You find it in the quiet places, in the moments of prayer, in the stillness of surrender. You find it when you stop trying to prove yourself and start trusting that who you are is already enough. You find it when you stop fighting for attention and start fighting for your soul. Because that kind of strength, the strength to act unbothered in a world full of chaos, doesn't come from this world. It comes from above. So I say to you, don't be afraid to be still. Don't be afraid to look calm when others expect rage. Don't be afraid to walk in silence when the world is demanding a show. There is something holy in that kind of self-control. There is something beautiful in being able to stand in the middle of a storm and say, I'm not moved by this. That's not pretending. That's power. That's knowing that the one who walks with you is greater than anything that rises against you. So hold your head high, keep your peace, and walk on.